Hey folks, welcome to the pre-show for tonight's Intrepid radio program. Good to have you all here, and I'm not sure which one of these is mine. Not that it matters much, but one of these waters is mine, one is not. So I don't mind drinking, it's my family drinking somebody else's water, but some of my kids, they like to backwash a lot. I don't know if they like to, they just do. And so you got to pick it up and see, are there any floaties in that my kids put in there? Is that mine? Do I usually put my lid back on so I know? Well, there you go. There's my problem for the day. So, hey, Steve Clark, good to see you. A little dry, but okay, he says. Yes, Niall Parkinson. Arbeit Macht Frei. Work makes you free. Exactly. Hey, Dave Potter, Uncle Dave, good to see you. And Romeldian, nice to have you here tonight. Good to see you. We got about 2.5 minutes before we go live. Let me get our... let's get us up on the air here. Oh, there we go. Little feedback. That little feedback always lets you know you're live. So we're not on air yet, but we're connected to the server. So good to have y'all. Glad you're here. Sup, bro? Says Uncle Dave. That's German, Romeldian. That is the phrase that was put over the entryway to Auschwitz concentration camp. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Hey, Emerald Eagle. Hey, all from Soggy, Pennsylvania. Favor be, he says. Good to have you. Matt Finn, Master Finn, good to see you. We got about a minute and a little over 1.5 minutes, and we go live. 4 minutes, 25 seconds after the top of the hour. So good to have you all here and everybody coming in. Matthew Sainsbury from Barbados, man. Good to see you. You look better today. I didn't sleep the whole night last night due to a severe toothache. Toothaches suck. I got to tell you that. That's the worst kind of pain there is. Oh, hi, kitty. Well, there you go. I got a cat crawling up on me. There's Bob Saget. Well, hi, Bob Saget. Well, hi. What are you doing? Huh? Bob Saget. All right. What do we got? We got a little under a minute, and we go live. Live. Oh, hi. What you doing? Huh? What you up to? Hey. This, of course, is the new kitty. Hi. I don't know. Hey, Arlene. Why, thank you. All right, everybody. I'm going to put this cat down and see if he'll stay on my... Hey, kids, come and get the kitty, somebody. All right, we're going to go dark. We'll be back live in a minute. Stay tuned.
Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad, so he can take me to Disneyland.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Happy Tuesday evening, folks. Welcome to the Intrepid radio program. I am your host, of course, Scotty Roberts, and this is my show. And I'm thankful that you're here, grateful that you show up, glad to have you here. If you're listening over on the radio at Odyssey Radio to our audio-only version, that's at odysy radio.com. You can also come over and tune in the simulcast in video. That's over in 3 different places on Facebook and then also on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts, where you can come right now. And there are people gathering, the fellow Intrepids, the brothers and sisters of Intrepid. That didn't make any sense. I didn't work that one out well enough. Well, we'll give that another try another night. So they're all over there. And those of you who I didn't get a chance to say hello to in the pre-show, welcome to the program. Thanks for being here. Love having you here. Arbeit Macht How do you say it? Heil. Free. Arbeit Macht Frei is the phrase. I don't speak German, so I had to listen to pronunciation online and see what that meant. Well, the Arbeit, I think they pronounce it Arbeit Macht Frei, is the phrase that is the title of tonight's show, and that's work makes you free. And if you don't know already, that's a very famous or infamous, however you want to look at it, phrase in the German language. And where does that appear? Does anybody know? I've told some of you over in the chat room in the pre-show. Do you know where that phrase is found? And it's still in wrought iron on a gate today. That phrase is found on the main gateway from the trains to Auschwitz, the concentration camp during World War II. And work makes you free. That was the, I guess, ironic phrase that was used by the Germans. It's a German phrase that means work sets you free or makes you free. And it makes one free. And that slogan is known for appearing on the entrance to Auschwitz and even other Nazi concentration camps. And the expression comes from the title of an 1873 novel by German philologist Lorenz Diefenbach, Arbeit Macht Frei. So there's a longer phrase, which I can't say. I'm going to butcher the German language here. Arbeit Macht Frei, Erzählung von Lorenz Diefenbach. Oh, that's just his name. And in which gamblers and fraudsters find the path to virtue through labor. And the phrase was also used in French, La travail rend libre, by Auguste Forel, a Swiss entomologist, a neuroanatomist, anatomist. There you go. Emphasis on the right syllable there. And psychiatrist. And in his Forems de la Suisse, or The Arts of Switzerland, 1920. And it goes on and on and on. And in 1933, the first political prisoners were being rounded up for an infinite period without charges in Germany. And they were held in a number of places in Germany. And the slogan, Arbeit Macht Frei, was first used over the gate of a wild camp in the city of Oranienburg, which was set up in an abandoned brewery in March of 1933. And it was later rebuilt in 1936 as Sachsenhausen. I think that's how you say that. And it was placed at the entrance to a number of German Nazi concentration camps. And the slogan's use was implemented at Dachau concentration camp. And from Dachau, it was copied by Rudolf Haas, who had previously worked there when he was appointed to create the original camp at Auschwitz, which became known as Auschwitz or Camp 1, and whose intended purpose was to incarcerate Polish political detainees. And the Auschwitz 1 sign was made by prisoner laborers, including master blacksmith Jan Lewatz, and features an upside-down B, which has been interpreted as an act of defiance by the prisoners who made it. And I'm not sure. The upside-down B. It's hard to tell because there's an upright and two curves. So that must have been their silent way to protest it. It's a new way of writing that the Nazi Party tried to implement during the war, they say. And this would explain why the curve on the R is the same size as the curve on the B. So there you go. But this goes on, and that sign is still there. It's not really a sign. It's an engraved wrought iron header, I guess, over the gate at Auschwitz. And so welcome, by the way, to all those of you who are coming in fresh tonight. Last night, we started talking about Eliezer Wiesel, who was at Auschwitz, the concentration camp, as a Jew during the war, and his experiences there and his memories of that place. He was a survivor. Almost didn't make it, but he did. And Elie Wiesel, if you remember, he was, we talked about it last night. He was Romanian born. He became an American writer, a professor, a political activist. He authored 57 books. He became a Nobel laureate and a Holocaust survivor. His work, Night, was part of a trilogy, and we talked about, that's what this is about. We're talking about that, his experiences as listed in that book. He was a professor of the humanities at Boston University, which eventually created the Elie Wiesel Center for Jewish Studies in his honor. And he was involved with Jewish causes and human rights causes and helped establish the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. This is the man we're talking about, and this is the book. We kind of left off talking about this book last night because we ran out of time. And I want to pick up some of the things that we were talking about. The last thing we kind of left off on, we talked about how his sister died, and it haunted him the rest of his life. She was taken from their family along with their mother when they first entered Auschwitz. We talked about how his father was beaten in front of him. And where we kind of left off is that Wiesel considered fighting for the formation of Israel. In 1947, and this is all, by the way, this is this man's experiences. And keep in mind, his book was, in a sense, detailing his guilt for having survived. That survivor's guilt that exists. And in 1947, you're talking just a couple of years after the end of the war, the United Nations passed a resolution allowing for the division of a formerly British territory of Palestine into two nations, one Arab and still called Palestine, even to this day, and the other Jewish and to be called Israel. And in 1948, the nation of Israel was officially founded, and 5 Arab nations immediately invaded them. They did not believe that Israel had a right to exist. I think their thinking was, this may be a dust bowl to you, but it's our dust bowl. And in 1948, and by the way, I think a lot of this was driven because this all happened within 3 years of the end of the war. I think it was driven by knowledge of the Holocaust, and that the Jews all fled to what was then known as Palestine, and started, and even before the war, in the early 1900s, they had started kibbutzes there, which is the big commune farming, and they started reclaiming the land, and there wasn't an official nation there. They just started doing that, and more Jews started traveling there. This is in light history of this. And then finally, after the war, they petitioned to be recognized as a nation. And 1948, Wiesel applied for a visa for Palestine with a plan to join Haganah, a Jewish paramilitary organization to fight for Jewish control of Israel. And his visa was rejected, and Wiesel elected not to travel there illegally to join the fighting. If you read Leon Uris's book, his book Exodus, that is a fictional novel, but is historical fiction. It's based on the Haganah and the fighting and all that happened over there to establish the state of Israel. And I don't know if you heard that, but I hear my children screaming upstairs. That's usually the little one. So she doesn't scream because she's in turmoil or tumult or chaos of anything other than her own making. It's just the way she is, and we got to deal with it. Breaking her of it, I must break you, I said to her once. Rainey laughed because she knew the reference. I must break you. And it still hasn't happened yet, but we're working on it. So if you hear screaming, there's not a great child massacre going on over here. It's my small children upstairs. So, Wiesel, going on with him, he feared that he couldn't live up to the task of writing about the Holocaust. And I would think that if you survived something like that, and now I'm not belittling anything by saying this way, but if you survived 9/11, I would think that would be a little easier to recount and to document and to write about than something like the Holocaust, where for years you had one group of people attempting to exterminate another group of people and putting them into concentration camps and so on. Now, for years, Wiesel didn't want to discuss or write about his Holocaust experience publicly. He feared that he wouldn't be able to find the right words to live up to such a tall task. However, he wrote memoirs in Yiddish for himself. French author and 1952 Nobel laureate in literature, François Mauriac, encouraged Wiesel to form his memoirs into a book and to translate them to French and to pursue publication. And Mauriac, he allegedly said to Wiesel, quote, 10 years ago, not very far from here, I knew Jewish children, every one of whom suffered 1,000 times more, 6 million times more than Christ on the cross. And we don't speak about them. And that was really what kind of pushed Wiesel into writing down his memoirs and talking about this. By the way, Sarah Yusuf says over in the chat room, the U.S. immigration quota system was used to maintain anti-Semitism against Jewish refugees. Yeah, they were. And did you know that in the book Exodus, the novel, was where one of the first places I read about this. Were you aware that the Jews fleeing Europe after the war, during and after the war, and many of them hopped on these steamers going to Israel, what is now Israel, or to Palestine. Some of them would run these big steamer ships aground on the Mediterranean coast of what is now Israel, of Palestine, and all the people would disembark there. And did you know that the British Army at the time rounded them up and put them into barbed wire tent cities, or in other words, concentration camps. So these are the people who either escaped concentration camps, they had gone through the concentration camps, they were liberated, and they were put back into concentration camps because nobody knew what to do with the people coming there, because there was no nation for them to be there. Niall says, I suppose if you go through an unacceptable trauma, that you have to box that off to continue to live and pursue a parallel life. Psychologists call it transference. Absolutely. Very good. Thank you, Niall, for that. I think you're absolutely right about that. Well, I don't think. I know. You're absolutely right about that. So for years, Wiesel did not want to discuss it or write about it until he was convinced to do so. Wiesel also reunited with one of his sisters in France after she saw his photo in a newspaper. In an interview in 2000, Wiesel admitted he thought all his sisters had died in the Holocaust. He just assumed it after seeing the death of his mother and his sister at Auschwitz. He said, back in 2000, Wiesel said, when I was still in Buchenwald, I studied the lists of survivors. My sister's names were not there. That's why I went to France. Otherwise, I would have gone back to my hometown of Sighet in Romania. Now, while Eliezer was living in a French orphanage in 1947, a journalist took his photo and it was published in a French newspaper. His sister Hilda saw the photo and managed to get in touch with the orphanage. The two hadn't seen one another since Elie and their father, Shlomo, were separated from Hilda, the sisters Beatrice and Zipporah, and mother Sarah, upon arrival at Auschwitz. Wiesel recalled this, and here's how he wrote about it. He said, in France, a clerk in an office at the orphanage told me that he had talked with my sister, who was looking for me. That's impossible, I told him. How would she even know I am in France? But he insisted that she told him that she would be waiting for me in Paris the next day. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I went to Paris, and there was my older sister. After our liberation, she had gotten engaged and gone to France because she thought I was dead too. Then one day she opened the paper and saw my photograph. A journalist had come to the orphanage to take the pictures and write a story. If it hadn't been for that, it may have been years before we met. My other sister had gone back to our hometown after our release, thinking that I might be there. And the following year, Elie reunited with Beatrice in Antwerp, Belgium, and she eventually emigrated to Canada, where she lived out the rest of her life. Could you imagine going through the horrific period of the Holocaust and being one of the targeted people of that, and then targeted for extermination, And that harrowing time. Remember, today, we don't think about this today. And I think young kids today who learn about this history don't realize that communication wasn't as easy as it is now. And it's wireless now. It was all wired back then. And telephones, and there was no internet. There was very little television that would, well, you all know. And so could you imagine, Sarah Yusuf says, just the thought of that makes me want to cry. And it does when you think about it. These things are so deeply ingrained in the consciousness of some of us, the subconsciousness of all of us. And there are some people that don't know much, if anything, about the Holocaust at all. Siani Reese says there's also a memory loss from high drama. I can't remember what it's called. It's super rare, but there are stories of it happening. It's like we blank out the trauma, the traumatic events from our minds. Children who are victims of abuse, sometimes severe abuse, will block out the memories of those things. Unfortunately, says Rudy Kessler, some schools don't even teach this history. And there are those who are Holocaust deniers who believe it never happened. Matthew Sainsbury says the Holocaust left a deep scar. It did. I can't believe there are people who exist that believe that it never happened. Or they must have some, my thinking is they must have some motivation for wanting people to believe it didn't happen. And they will therefore try to create routes of thinking that would leave somebody not believing that it ever took place. Elie Wiesel, he wrote about hate and hating, but he speaks of tolerance. Can you put those two things together in your mind? Hate, but tolerance. In 2000, Wiesel spoke of his relationship with hate, an emotion that figures prominently in certain passages of his book, Night. He was asked, in your memoir, Night, you write of the Hungarian soldiers who drove you from your homes. It was from that moment that I began to hate them, you wrote. And that hate is still the only link between us today. And Elie Wiesel responded, I wrote that, but I didn't hate. I just felt terribly angry and humiliated. At that point, our disappointment was not with the Germans, but with the Hungarians. They had been our neighbors before they joined forces with the Nazis and captured us. The moment we left our homes, they became vultures. They came into our house. They robbed us of everything. And I was terribly disappointed. I used the word hate back then because that was the strongest feeling I could imagine having. But when I think about it now, there was no hate in me. I grew up learning that hate destroys the hater as much as it destroys its victim. I didn't hate the Germans, so how can I hate the Hungarians? And he was asked the follow-up simple question, so you don't hate the Germans? And Wiesel said, I do not hate them. I don't believe in collective guilt. Listen to that. I don't believe in collective guilt. The children of killers are not killers, but children. And they deserve my affection, my efforts to make them human, to give them a world that is worthy of them. Occasionally, I have students from Germany in my classes, and they are the best students I could have. They go back to Germany and they become leaders who teach their generation the perils of hatred and the danger of indifference. In any society, fanatics who hate don't hate only me, they hate you too. They hate everybody. Someone who hates one group will end up hating everyone and ultimately hating himself or herself. Oof, that's pretty heavy duty when you think about that. If you hate one group, you'll hate everybody. If you can justify hatred, and this, when you think about it, he was asked, do you hate the Germans? No, because the Germans weren't all people who tormented and executed all of us. They have children too. Before Night was published as a slim volume in France in 1958, it was an 862-page behemoth tome called And the World Was Silent. Just think about that title for a second, those words. And the world was silent. Do you think that there were those who did not know the Holocaust was taking place? Now, I will say that many of us, the Allies, many of us learned about what was happening later into the war. There were rumors and rumors of rumors. Yet, do you think there were not industrialists and industrialist leaders that did not know the Holocaust was taking place? Wiesel gave his manuscript to a publisher who cut out more than 600 pages of his book and changed the title to Night. Which I wish I understood his reasoning why he did that. Maybe he thought that was in a day and age where they thought that was too much for the world to handle. Maybe too much for the world to handle after the war. Or perhaps he was not somebody who believed the Holocaust was worth remembering. The Dalai Lama once requested an audience with Wiesel to discuss his work and his experiences. The Dalai Lama is, of course, Tibet's holy leader in exile. He travels the world lecturing on compassion, forgiveness, tranquility, and other Buddhist and humanist topics. And by the way, I used to do this show a long time ago and would read, I have the 365 days of the Dalai Lama. I don't care what you think of him politically or whatever, but his words are filled with wisdom. And I used to start the show by reading, what's today? Today is October 4th. If I had the book here now, I'd read something. Today is October 4th. What does he have to say for October 4th? And so on. But according to a profile in the New Yorker magazine, when he first began doing this, His Holiness spoke in the esoteric language of Tibetan Buddhism, much to the confusion of the Western audiences. And looking to develop a more populist international lexicon for his talks, and seeking to better understand the meaning of life in exile, the Dalai Lama requested an audience with Elie Wiesel. And to quote from the New Yorker, here's what he said. According to Wiesel, the Dalai Lama said, "I'm familiar with your work, what you wrote about the word seemed clunky to me here in the sentence. I'm familiar with your work, what you wrote about the Jewish people losing their homeland 2,000 years ago, and how you're still here. Mine has just lost its homeland, and I now know it's going to be a very long road into exile. How did you survive?" So the Dalai Lama asked him. Well, Wiesel replied, "When we left Jerusalem, we didn't take all our jewels with us. All we took was a little book. It was a book that kept us alive. Second, because of our exile, we developed a sense of solidarity. When Jews left one place for the next, there were always Jews to welcome and take care of them. And third, good memory, survival, takes good memory. And of course, as you know, the Jewish religion is set up on oral tradition as well as written tradition, and the memory, the reciting of the history of the scriptures and so on. So there's the Dalai Lama says, we had to leave our homeland into exile. How did you survive it? And that was his answer. The book Night played an integral role in global Holocaust awareness and memory. When Elie Wiesel passed away on July 2nd of 2016, just a handful of years ago, I remember when he died, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum director, Sarah J. Bloomfeld, sat down with Gabe Bullard of National Geographic to discuss Wiesel's legacy and impact. And during the interviews, Bullard asked Bloomfield how Wiesel's work figures into Holocaust memory and awareness in popular consciousness. And Bloomfield responded this: when Night was published in 1955, that was really a watershed moment. It was at a time when the Holocaust really hadn't penetrated public consciousness the way it has today. I think you can attribute much of the global movement for Holocaust memory to the publication of Night and to Elie's other writings to bring it to the forefront of not only awareness, but of our moral conscience. He wanted to prick the moral conscience as much as possible. And Night is a book I have not read. And now I am very much inspired to read Wiesel's work. Wiesel remained conflicted about continuing to recount his experiences. In 1981, Wiesel expressed concern about continuing to recount his Holocaust experience. He felt he had a duty to all those who didn't survive while he did that again, that survivor's guilt that he had. I survived and so many did not. Why me? And to make sure that their memories were preserved. On the other hand, the war and the Holocaust was, in his opinion, something that transcended language and therefore was very difficult to articulate. On one hand, we must testify, says Wiesel. If I survived, it must be for some reason. I must do something with my life. It's too serious to play games with anymore because in my place, someone else could have saved. And so I speak for that person. On the other hand, I know I cannot. The war, in my experience, transcends language. It's impossible to transmit. I know one thing no one else will know except those others who have been there. When we left that war, when we left that world, we didn't talk about it. It's too personal. It's too intimate. But it's always present. I know whatever I do, whatever I write, is always against the background of that event. And that's what Wiesel had to say. Wiesel had to say about the Holocaust, about his books, about the things he wrote about. And we've got a good 15 minutes left, and that's good because I got a few things I want to relay to you. And there are facts that you should know about the Holocaust. You know, I'm going to make a stretch here. I see Ruben Fasthorse out there. And Ruben, I'll bring you in during the captain's cabin. But Ruben Fasthorse, while he is not individually a survivor of the movement West, the conquest of the West, and the subjugation of the Native American tribes, he is an offspring of those people. And so, like Elie Wiesel said, the big question to ask is, because I survived, or I am the product of survivors, why me? Why was my family here? Why am I chosen to do something greater? And I look at Ruben, and I know you hear me out there, Ruben, and I'll bring you in a bit. But Ruben is somebody that I know looks at himself, and I hope you don't mind that I relay this, Ruben. He called me one night a long time ago, 6 months or more, and I could tell he'd been crying, and he said, "I'm just really heavy with this today." And we talked for a little bit, and he is somebody who is now, because he is alive, he is tasked with doing something for his people. And this is what Elie Wiesel said about himself. This is who I am. This is what I'm tasked to do. This is why, although I have the survivor's guilt, this is why I still exist. This is why I survived. And the Holocaust, if I want to slip into some definitions, some facts about the Holocaust that you might not know. The Holocaust is one of the most notorious acts of genocide in modern history. It happened, damn it, folks, it happened within some of our own grandparents' lifetimes, maybe some of your lifetimes who are listening to this show. It's not that long ago. And the many atrocities that were committed by Nazi Germany before and during World War II destroyed millions of lives, permanently altered the face of Egypt. Of Europe. I say Egypt so often in my discussions. So here's some key terms for you. Holocaust. It's from the Greek word holocauston, meaning sacrifice by fire. It refers to the Nazi persecution and planned slaughter of the Jewish people and others considered inferior to the true Aryan race. Shoah, S-H-O-A-H, Shoah. It's a Hebrew word meaning devastation, ruin, or waste, also used in reference to the Holocaust. Final solution. That was the Nazi term referring to their plan to exterminate the Jewish people. The final solution. Kristallnacht, literally crystal night, or the night of broken glass. This refers to the night of November 9th through the 10th, 1938, when thousands of synagogues and Jewish-owned homes and businesses in Austria and Germany were attacked. Concentration camp. Although we use the blanket term concentration camp, there were actually a number of different types of camps with different purposes. These included extermination camps, labor camps, prisoner of war camps, and transit camps. The Holocaust began in 1933 when Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany, and it ended in 1945 at the end of the war and his death, when the Nazis were defeated by the Allied powers. The term Holocaust is derived from the Greek word holocauston, and it means to sacrifice by fire. It refers to the Nazi persecution and planned slaughter of the Jewish people and others considered to be inferior to true, quote-unquote, Germans. The Hebrew word Shoah means the devastation, the ruin, the waste, and it refers to the genocide. In addition to Jews, the Nazis targeted the Roma, or the Romani, the gypsies, if you will, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses were part of this. Did you know that? Jehovah's Witnesses were targeted in the Holocaust, and people with disabilities for persecution. And those who resisted the Nazis were sent to forced labor camps, or they were outright murdered. And the word Nazi is a German acronym for National Socialist Deutsch. I don't know if I can even pronounce that. Arbeit Party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, is what it means. True socialism, by the way. And the Nazis, Nazis, I hate those guys. But the Nazis sometimes use the term final solution to refer to their plan to exterminate the Jewish people. And although the origins of this are unclear, according to historians, the death toll of the Holocaust, according to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, a little over 17 million people, 17 million, were killed during the Holocaust. But no single document exists recording the total number. 6 million of these were Jews, approximately 2/3 of all Jews living in Europe. 6 million of the about 9 million Jews in Europe. An estimated 1.5 million Jewish children, and thousands of Romani, German, and Polish children died in the Holocaust. Now, maybe to some of you listening or watching, this is really, this sounds so negative. It's really a downer, to use a vernacular word, of a topic. But I'm not trying to be dark and dour and negative, with only one exception, that we do not forget how dark and devastating this was. And the brilliance is that people like Elie Wiesel survived and existed to shed better light on this. These are just, I've got some statistics here. The number of Holocaust deaths. It's from the U.S. National Holocaust Museum. As more information and records are uncovered, it's likely that these numbers will change, but all numbers are approximate. 6 million Jews, 5 to 7 million Soviet civilians, an additional 1.3 Soviet Jewish civilians are included in the 6 million figure already for the Jews. 3 million Soviet prisoners of war, including about 50,000 Jewish soldiers. 1.9 million Polish civilians, non-Jewish. 312,000 Serb civilians. Up to 250,000 people with disabilities because you were inferior to the Aryan race. Up to 250,000 Romani, gypsies. 1,900 Jehovah's Witnesses. At least 70,000 repeat criminal offenders and asocials. An undetermined number of German political opponents and activists. And hundreds or thousands of homosexuals might be included in the 70,000 repeat criminal offenders and asocial number that I've already given you. At the beginning of the Holocaust was April 1st, 1933. The Nazis instigated their first action against German Jews by announcing a boycott of all Jewish-run businesses. The Nuremberg laws, issued on September 15th of 1935, were designed to exclude Jews from public life. The Nuremberg laws stripped German Jews of their citizenship and prohibited marriages and extramarital sex between Jews and Gentiles. Listen to the patterns in here, the patterns of genocide, the patterns of control, the patterns of eradication. Jewish laws over the next several years. They issued numerous anti-Jewish laws over the next several years. And Jews were banned from public parks. They were fired from civil service jobs. They were forced to register their property. Other laws barred Jewish doctors from treating anyone other than Jewish patients. They expelled Jewish children from public schools and placed severe travel restrictions on Jews. Overnight on November 9th and 10th, it's Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. This included the pillaging and burning of synagogues, the breaking of windows of Jewish-owned businesses, the looting of those stores. And in the morning, broken glass littered the ground down the streets of the cities. And many Jews were physically attacked or harassed, and approximately 30,000 were arrested and sent to concentration camps. After the war started in 1939, the Nazis ordered Jews to wear a yellow Star of David on their clothing so they could be easily recognized and targeted. Homosexuals were similarly targeted and forced to wear pink triangles. After the beginning of World War II, the Nazis began ordering all Jews to live in small, segregated areas of big cities called ghettos. And I would think the most well-known of these is the Warsaw Ghetto in Poland. They could not leave. They were they could go to work during the daytime, but they had to be back by curfew. All ghettos became closed, meaning the Jews were not allowed to leave under any circumstances. No traffic in or out. And it was like a big concentration camp. Other ghettos were found in present-day Minsk, Belarus, Riga, Latvia, and Vilna, Lithuania. You get tongue-tied sometimes. But of course, the largest ghetto was in Warsaw. At its peak in March of 1941, before we had even entered the war from America, some 445,000 were crammed into an area just 1.3 square miles in size. And if you want to get a good take on the Warsaw Ghetto, I mentioned this book last night. Read Leon Uris, U-R-I-S. Read his novel, Mila 18. Well worth the time to read it, to understand the Warsaw Ghetto a little better. They regulated and they liquidated the ghettos. The Nazis ordered the Jews to establish a Jewish council to administer Nazi demands and to regulate the internal life of the ghetto. And Jewish resistance fighters held out against the entire Nazi regime for almost a month in 1943. And then the concentrations, although many people refer to all Nazi camps as concentration camps, there were actually all different kinds, which we mentioned a bit earlier. Concentration camps, extermination camps, labor camps, prisoner of war camps, and transit camps. Life within a Nazi concentration camp was horrible. Prisoners were forced to do hard physical labor and given little food to subsist on. They slept 3 or more to a crowded wooden bunk, and bedding was unheard of. Torture within the concentration camps was common, and deaths were frequent. In a number of concentration camps, Nazi doctors conducted medical experiments on prisoners against their will. And then the death camps, of course. While concentration camps were meant to work and starve prisoners to death, extermination camps, also known as the death camps, were built for the sole purpose of exterminating large groups of people quickly and efficiently, gassing them, burning them, and so on. Those are some of the facts you might not know about the Holocaust. And so I'm going to end this little tiny 2-day series we did on the Holocaust with referring to Elie Wiesel's book, Night, and his experiences as a survivor. There are very few Holocaust survivors left today, as it's, 80 years later now. But if you don't know much about the Holocaust, I think it would behoove you and I and everyone else to teach yourself more about it. That we sincerely do never forget. And so I'm going to leave the radio audience and we're going to go to the captain's cabin in just a few seconds here. I want to thank you for being here over on the radio. If you are not already over in the YouTube channel, come on over, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts for the after show, the Captain's Cabin. And we will see you there in just a few minutes. Live long and prosper.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Are you looking for a really awesome and amazing graphic designer? How about an illustrator or a photographer? This is Rainey Roberts, and I wanted to tell you how you can get my designer, illustrator husband, Scotty Roberts, to work for you on your project. Do you have an awesome self-published book but no cover, or even worse, a cover that really sucks? Do you need a kick-ass logo for your company or some f***ing awesome graphic designs for your ads or website? Then get in touch with my husband for the best f***ing awesome kick-ass design and illustration. He knows his stuff, and he's been at this for more years than I've been alive. Go to ScottAllenRoberts.com. That's Scott with 2 T's, ALANROBERTS.com to take a look at his online portfolio of work, or call 651-468-8115. Now go out and kick some ass with some kick-ass graphic design.
Hire my dad so he can take me to Disneyland.
Well, welcome everyone to the Captain's Cabin. Let's see if we can lighten the tone a little bit after the heaviness of the last two nights. And it takes a little bit out of me when I talk about these things. I don't know if I can explain that. I don't even know if I can explain it to myself, but it's there. And when you do that, and talking about that, I hate to say that it's such a dark, mentally exhausting, emotionally draining thing to talk about these things, but it does, for me anyway. Maybe that makes me a little weird. I don't know. But I'm not up for a very long Captain's Cabin, but we'll do a little bit tonight. Stop calling me heavy, says Grumpy Stack. I'll do my best, skinny man, with the skinny wife. So let's I'll try to lighten it up a bit. That doesn't mean we can't talk about these topics at all in the Captain's Cabin tonight. But there it is. It is necessary, Sarah Yusuf. I keep saying it. I'll do that forever. Tarot. But we've got Ruben Fast Horses sitting in the wings. He came in a little while ago, and so I told him to hang on till we get to the Captain's Cabin. Oh, let's take off our header for tonight because we don't need that. We're not in Intrepid Radio so much anymore as Captain's Cabin. And let's go get Ruben and bring him in. Boom. Ruben Fast Horse, how you doing, brother? Misu?
Mataya, Chia.
Good to see you.
This actually glows in the dark.
Very nice. But your lights are all on there, so.
But
now,
I'd
do you
love
wear
your
red
subject.
around the house all day, or
Live from New York. I'm Ruben Fast Horse.
yes?
Hey, I
yes.
loved your subject on the whole genocide aspect of it. I'm not trying to cop on it or anything like that.
Sure.
I'm just going to say this real quick. My girlfriend is Jewish.
Yes.
And my last two wives were German. Und ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen ich auch. So I speak German.
Jawohl.
Well. And I've been to Germany. And I asked for a swastika flag. And they said, "Ooh,
Oh,
you don't talk about that. You don't bring that.
it's illegal. It's illegal to sell it
It's
over
illegal." And I didn't know that Germans today give 10% of their money from their jobs to the state of Israel. People don't know that. And so to help them. So aside from that, genocide, the worst genocide that was ever given to anybody was what Americans did to Native Americans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the worst genocide. And so you said something about Holocaustian or Holocaustian type of stuff. The Greek word for they were against homosexuals. They were against Jehovah's Witnesses. They were against many things. And it's sad. And 17 million were killed by Nazi rule, and then 6 million were Jews. But people don't know that that's what Americans did, and that's where the Nazis got it from. They got it from concentration camps. Where they get it from? The way they treated Native Americans. They put them in camps.
Sure. I would think that while they might have known of that from history, I think the concentration camp or the concentrating of enemies into a place to exterminate them or make them work for you is probably pretty ancient. So I would think that there are similarities to be made. Certainly.
Indeed. You're right. And
Dave Potter, you're with us, by the way.
Yep.
God love Dave Potter. God keep him. God love him.
Masons were gathered up and persecuted as well.
Yes.
They gave us red triangles.
You know, they did the same thing World War II with the Japanese. They put them in concentration camps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, our concentration camps here, I hear comparisons that get made of that about that historically.
It's very different.
While it was a very bad thing to have done, it was a very different thing. They didn't put them there to exterminate them. They put them there because there was a great fear of Japanese nationals and their children that were living.
Well, and
in America,
it wasn't just the Japanese.
That they might join the Japanese army if they invaded the West Coast.
That's true, but it's not just the Japanese. They also had internment camps for Italian Americans and German Americans.
Oh yeah,
indeed,
German Americans.
You're right, Dave.
And so that's the way. Well, I was talking specifically about Japanese. What is the castle in? Is it in Indiana? The castle that is still there now. You see it in a lot of paranormal shows. They had German nationals put there and German prisoners of war put there while there was an orphanage there.
Well, and in fact, the German Bund was a very real thing in the Midwest here.
Mm-hmm. And there's probably, as far as we know, there could be German descendants of those people that just never left here. They just faded into the woodwork at the end of the war.
You know,
So-
Scotty, when you looked at the swastika,
Mm-hmm.
because I asked for a flag I was in Köln or Cologne, as they say, but in German they say Köln. And I asked, and they said like, shh, we don't talk about that.
Wow.
Forbidden.
Yep.
So, under research, I studied how the swastika, that is what we know, you flip that swastika, it's a Native American symbol of migration. On the Buddha, on his toes, big toe, little toe, it's swastikas. But the Germans flipped it to make it look like they made a negative. So,
Well, one direction it's a symbol of creation, and the other direction it's a symbol of
Yes.
destruction. And they used
Indeed.
it as a symbol of destruction.
indeed. And so they flipped it and they made it destruction, negative. But on the Buddha's toes and on the Native American symbol, which we have, and we come from them, Mongolians, Buddhists, it was a migration symbol. It was a positive symbol. It was ancient. So, yeah. Thank you, Sarah. It seems like we can't learn from that particular historical lesson. She's right.
That's true.
And it's true. It's true. It's so we're constantly relearning our heritage, whether you're black, white, red, yellow, white, it doesn't matter. We're still learning from our past, because lest we learn it, we will repeat it. So
Right. As the old phrase.
and they don't even teach it properly in the schools anymore.
oh my God.
That's the
You know,
When I was a kid, we learned about the Trail of Tears and all the stuff that went on with the Lakota and the Dakota and such. They're not teaching that anymore. We learned about the Holocaust and the destruction and all that stuff. They don't teach that. So I think they're so afraid they're going to offend somebody, they just stop teaching.
Yeah.
And history is supposed to be offensive. If it's
It
not
is.
offensive, you're not
Indeed.
learning from it.
it has to. It has to hurt. It
When
has
we
to hurt,
talked-
Dave.
All those weeks, a couple of years ago, when I spent 7 weeks on Bury My Hearted Wounded Knee and the Native American perspective of the taking of the American West by the United States. And I spent the time on that. And that was very harrowing. What's the word I'm looking for? And you, Dave, just mentioned it, and you agreed with him. History is meant to be
Offensive.
wounding. It's supposed to wound us. It's supposed to make us think. And history, by the way, history itself is amoral. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's not for this person or that person, depending on who wrote it. But the real history is amoral. It just is. It's what happened.
That's Buddhist.
And
That's Buddhism right there. It's not right.
Yeah.
It's not wrong. It is. It just is.
it is. It just is. And Sarah Yusuf, swastika has been used in pagan and Indian cultures. It's cultural appropriation. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's it. We're going to.
But it's not unlike the Satanists taking the cross and flipping it upside down or something.
not
You
unlike.
Take a holy symbol and reverse it for your destruction.
You know, and Dave, you're right in saying that, because I grew up a Catholic among Jesuit, the soldier priests, Jesuit black robes that came to our country, and the cross is a symbol of God sacrificing himself for our humanity. Yet, at the same time, when you flip it, it's distress. Just like when you take the American flag and you flip it upside down,
Yes.
Right.
Americans have it as a symbol of distress. So, saying that to say this, that the Christianity is backwards because Christ is really a Greek term for savior, healer, and we've twisted it. We as humanity have twisted that whole concept to make it like he's the savior, he's gonna help us, and he's gonna save us, and it's bullshit. It's bullshit because we save ourselves, we save our children, we save our kids, we save our humanity. Done.
Well, and when you think about that to a certain degree, without stepping on anybody's religious sensibilities, you step back a little bit and look at humanity and look at human life. When we advance the most, or when we get out of it's not usually because we're waiting on or relying on somebody to save us, although that does happen. It's because we work our way through, and we work our way to finding the answer. We work our way to doing better, and in a sense to saving ourselves. Now, that's perhaps antithetical to a Christian theological belief, but I think that you see that pattern in human history, is that a people that wants its freedom, that wants out of the trial and the tribulation of what they're going through, are a people that not necessarily are waiting for someone to come and do it for them, but they're the ones stepping out and saying, I will take this stand. I will stand in the gap. I will be the one, or we will together be the ones that will make this happen. And I think that's probably some of our most poignant lessons from history, the poignant stories we get from history. And Dave and I have been involved in reenacting. So have you, Ruben. And we recreate some of these stories of people not waiting on someone to be their rescuer, but on becoming the ones who rescue themselves, who fight for a reason.
Indeed.
And so, I don't know. Thoughts on that, Dave?
No,
Do
not
we-
off the top of my head, I guess.
Do we save ourselves? Do we is history? That's a bad way to put it. So my brain is not working on full tonight either. So,
I'm just going to jump in here to save Dave.
Thanks, brother.
It's when we look at it, and from a Native American perspective, you are the god, you are the goddess. When Joseph Campbell, who wrote the books, several books, the one I love is The Power of Myth.
yes,
When we bring our lore, legends, sacredness to a level that is spiritual, then we're conscious, we're there. And so that's why we have that's why Native Americans have little people, and Irish have little people, and Scottish have little people, and it's not
Sure.
just us, it's
talking about
worldly. And how can that be? But because we have an archetype from the beginning. Maybe we came from China, and then African, and then we came Native American and white, and yada 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 yada, whatever you want to call it. But we are who we are simply by our legends, lore, and what we do. We tell our children, and I used to tell my children, when you see those little lightning bugs, those are fairies. But when you get close, they turn into little lightning bugs. Daddy, that's a lightning bug. I said, yeah,
Mhm.
but when you see them, they become lightning bugs. But
Yes,
when you don't see them, they're little fairies.
there it
And
is.
so, so it just makes sense for them.
Yeah,
And that's who we are. Then that's our legends, lore, and myth.
sure.
Um,
Sarah said, "Who wouldn't want a savior when you have an oppressed people?" Sarah, you're in here. You've joined us. I understand that need
Thank
for
you,
a savior.
Sarah.
Wasn't the whole? I think of if you've ever seen the animated film, now an old animated film. It's close to 30 years old. The Prince of Egypt, which is a musical of Moses and the children of Israel in Egypt and under oppression, and they had that song "Deliver Us," and it shows them all in slavery. And of course, this is a biblical story, so it's not like that's the. I didn't mean to imply that's the first place we heard about that, but in that song, it talks about "Deliver Us," and it's very. Elohim, God of mine, won't you hear your people cry? Something
Encompassing,
now,
very
deliver us, deliver us. It's very powerful, and so I don't know. And on that note, Sarah, welcome.
Hey guys.
You kind of brought up that topic with what you had to say.
No, I mean you talked about it first, so I was just commenting in the chat room. But I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
so there's that. I mean, it's a repeating cycle.
Yeah.
It's that lesson that we as humanity, are we oppress each other, we kill each other. It's a lesson we don't seem to be able to learn from.
Mhm.
There was always competition for resources or hatred or whatever. It's always been out there, and it kind of like goes and comes in waves. Those epic cycles.
Sure.
But, I mean, it's happening. All over the world. It's like you say, it's becoming quite an archetype, and you see it all over the place.
Yes.
But there was one thing that really stuck out of my mind when you were talking is that you were talking earlier about the actual locations of the of the concentration camps, and
Yeah.
like Auschwitz and Dachau and all that.
Go.
Yeah. So I mean, even people that I've spoken to recently who have recently been to those places, and you were talking about how you wanted to talk about how you wanted to go see those places. I've known certain families that have gone visited those types of places, and they have little kids, kids that are unconscious are not conscious of of the history, the fine points of the history of that generation, of knowing that. But even how kids are, they're noisy and they run around and all that stuff. And even when
banging around
they
up there
went
all
to
night.
the
What? This is Dave incredulously.
right. Even when they went to those places, I mean, the energy is such that even they were affected. Like they were quiet, settled down, all that stuff. And
Sure.
you can't even imagine the amount of trauma that's been just concentrated in one area. I mean, just from a spiritual perspective, I mean, that land is probably scarred forever,
Yes.
I mean, it's hard to imagine the amount of compassion that would be needed to even begin.
I don't know how mediums walk through a place like that.
Yeah.
I just maybe this sounds goofy. Maybe it's a little too on the woo paranormal side of things.
Well, that's right up my alley.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm
you mentioned
extremely empathic, so I try and avoid places like that.
Well, you mentioned that, Sarah, and I'm sitting here when you're talking about just the idea of the place exists and people want to see it. and it starts to well up in me, and I'm like, why does it do that to me? I've never been there.
Well, I mean, you're human. I mean,
well, yeah,
it's going from one extreme to the other. I mean, people are
Yeah.
capable of being very, as you know, people involved in that were dehumanizing other people to the point where they were treated as objects,
yes,
or things that were easily thrown away, tossed into a fire, or just shot when you're not working hard enough for it.
Oh, it's the I get the same thing. And Ruben, you have to be here when we plan this trip. Hopefully next summer. We want to go
Indeed.
out west, and I've talked about Dave. I want Dave to come. My daughters want to come. Sam wants to come. Our whole family. Take a little trip out west of here, and I wanted to now because we are Washti. We are white folk. We're probably just waltzing into the Pine Ridge Reservation. Just doesn't happen without perhaps some repercussion. So,
first
but I
place
would
in
love to see.
America.
Yeah, I would love to see Wounded Knee, the Wounded Knee Monument, the Wounded Knee gravesite, the place where the massacre took place. I've had that. There's like a palpable, I don't even know what to call it, in the back of my head about that. That to me, that seems like a place that would, there's a desire I have to go there, and I don't know why the desire is there so much, but I want to go there and see that and sit there and pray there and meditate there. And
what I'm going to say this to say that I think as a tour guide myself, bringing people there, they've cried, lamented, and I told them I wasn't there as an American. They're my people, but you weren't there too,
right.
but you recognize the hardship. It's like going to Gettysburg and seeing, people see ghosts walking across, soldiers that have passed and whatnot. So it's hard, and Dave can attest to that. So it's these sacred spots where it's a dent. I would call it a dent in time. And Sarah just touched upon that.
And isn't it funny?
It's resonant empathy. I mean, because we all have them.
Isn't it funny that I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, I mean, what I was saying is it's resonant empathy, because we are human beings. There is such thing as energetic memory that gets passed down from
multi-generational grieving.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Genetic. We used to call it just genetic memory. Why is it that? What makes a place sacred? You said that a second ago, Ruben. What makes a place? What renders it sacred or holy? When you usually those places are places that have been filled with tragedy. That's a general statement I'm making, but
I would say, and Dave and Sarah cop on me here. It's a dent in time. It's a dent in time in the sense of that in history, something so terrible and something so beautiful happened, but it's a dent regardless. And
I think also the concentration of blood and death
what I learned
in one location makes it sacred.
What I learned, stupid as that sounds, I was watching these ghost hunters things, but the one that really caught me was in California, where they had this hotel that had these episodes of ghosts, and so I was just watching and thinking, what's going on? And downstairs, long time ago was a billiards parlor.
Oh, the billiards. Yeah.
Billiards.
Pool.
Thank you for
Pool.
correcting me. But it was it was crazy because the billiards, the
Hi,
balls, the billiard balls were not the same
what?
as pool balls.
Hold on. Hey. Hold on.
Pool-
Keep going, Ruben.
Pool balls are not the same consistency of billiard balls. Billiard balls were made from ivory.
Yeah.
So they're thicker, harder, dense, and so they put all these cameras up and all around the hotel and whatnot, and then the billiard room, and they would hear these cracking, like balls, pool balls would do, billiard balls would do. But there was a difference because they were ivory as opposed to plastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they recorded all that and saw a rise in the billiards that were ivory as opposed to the plastic. And there was a consistency of them doing a dance and song and dance and back and forth, and that was amazing. And they said what they determined, the result was time has a memory. Something happened there that is recorded in time. And when you play pool, yeah, it's recorded, but it's every day. But that specific sound was recorded at a certain time. And I thought that was fascinating.
That is fascinating. It's fascinating stuff. So, guys, it's just about 10:30. It's 10:27. I hate to say this. I've got to go. Rainey just got home, and there's a couple of things going on. And I have to leave the show. So if I could leave you in charge, I would. So my apologies to you guys. I got to sign off and get out of here. And no emergency, just something that's got to be taken care of. So
leave Dave in charge.
There you go. I can't turn it over to him.
StreamYard doesn't let you do that.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
I can
all
just let it play and remove myself from the studio, but then I don't think the show would perpetuate. So on that quick impromptu note, I'm going to have to say goodnight to everybody. That's, I guess, the beauty of not being bound to a radio station for these after shows is that I can bail when I have to. And so it's probably a good idea I get out of here right now and take care of some stuff that's going on. So, Sarah, you have a good night.
All right.
Good
Thank
seeing
you
you,
guys.
Ruben.
Tomorrow. And Ruben, Misu, you as well. Thanks for coming on. And Brother Dave, I will talk to you.
I'll see you this week painting.
All right. What's that?
I'll see you this week while we're painting.
That's right. That's right. So I'll talk to you soon. All right, guys. I want to thank you for being here. Pardon my abrupt exit tonight. I've got some things that I have to take care of with my wife and my kids. So on that note, I'm just going to say, you know what? I'll bid you a farewell and a good night, and live long and prosper.